Hello and welcome to the Annie Altman Show, the podcast, season 5. Welcome to the 7th episode in the Change series. I'm here today with Deacon Conroy for his second time on the podcast. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here, Deacon.
Thank you. I'm impressed that you have 5 seasons. That's pretty amazing.
Thank you. I'm honored for you coming on for a second time.
Me too. I'm happy to be back. And as I said, I want to be your first third timer.
That'd be pretty cool. Maybe for another one of the C's. There's a lot of episodes to come here. Season 5, 110 episodes. It's casual.
I can talk a lot, as you know, so that's no problem.
Fill up a bunch of them. So Deacon is a meditation and yoga teacher in Los Angeles. He has a YouTube channel. You do Zoom classes. You do a lot of restorative and yin. And you're super into props, which I love.
Yeah, I encourage a lot of prop use, not just in yin or restorative classes, definitely there, but also in vinyasa flow classes. People don't use them enough. They think they can do the poses correctly, and I think they're just messing themselves up. So yeah, I would consider myself a prop work specialist, and I have a unique take on it, which I don't see other people using props how I use them, which I think is I kind of like.
You do get really creative with them. And I actually remember one of the first things when I met you at the studio, one of the first conversations we had was about prop usage.
Really?
Like, yeah, I said something to you about like some joke about the number of blocks for class. And I was like, oh, should I grab 7 blocks? And you were like, yeah, here's what I can do with 7 blocks. Like, here's this picture of a very creative 7-block Shavasana.
Yeah. What's the name of that pose? It's actually it's called floating Shavasana, but when you use those blocks on you, it's called like bed of nails or something like that, whatever the prop. Someone on Instagram corrected me one day because I called it the wrong name, so namaste to them.
Wishing you well. Maybe they'll listen to this episode.
I hope so.
And change how they communicate online in an instant of, maybe I don't need to correct all the, maybe they were wanting to be like, here's the name for this, and also there's different names too, and like the different name for yin, or then you use a prop, and there's another name for things, and
yeah, that's kind of annoying about yoga is that whenever there's like a new style, they just think they can make up the new name for the pose, whatever it is. And I've noticed that a lot in LA yoga, that it's the push to get creative and come up with all these different shapes and different things, and as far as the circles that I've taught in. But it gets to be too much when people are saying, oh, I'm going to call this pose, twisted beach ball, when all you're doing is just like a twist holding your arms over your head, And it's like, I get it, but after a while, you want to cue the students so they know what to do, but it's like, in some ways, it's almost like talking down to students like kids, like, all right, remember to, like what would be an example? Remember to shoot your arrow and do stuff like that. And it's fine to be creative, but like, just let's get back to more of the practice of like, it's not about the teacher, it's about the students, it's about what you can get them to learn right there. And, as you know, I like to make people learn to be a little bit slower and a little bit quieter in their practice, especially not just in the tempo of the class, but in their tempo of the breath, because people overbreathe, and we're encouraged to do things that our teachers taught us, so the places we practice, where we've learned from. And I just don't agree with a lot of the breath cues in yoga about like breathing for your neighbor, like doing this really like constrictive breath, because it's like you're almost making your body feel like it's gonna die, because you're like you're almost choking yourself in a way. And I just think it's just an intensity. It's just kind of misdirected. And what if we just started breathing softer? It's like, and almost tried not to breathe when you practice. Your body will like naturally do it, but like somewhat limiting the depth of your inhales, limiting the intensity of your breath, and just instead of trying to calm your heart rate, just let your breath relax. Just let it like drop down, like it'll do its thing. Just like, I guess I was saying that a lot for a while. I was like, just leave your breath alone. Just leave it the fuck alone. It'll It'll get you there. Where's your attention?
Oof, easier said than done, and a fun like continual game of like, where is it now? I haven't heard over breathe before. I like
Yeah, I
that,
think
and it is like that other end of the extreme of like, okay, well now I'm paying attention. I'm in a yoga class. I'm on my mat. I'm gonna pay attention to my breath really intensely now. Oh my gosh, breathe deeper. I'm like going. I've
yeah,
totally done that of like be really zen and like forcing that through.
yeah,
It's
and
like it is that. Well, what
it's
if you just left
yoga's
it?
yoga's intense enough, right? It's intense enough to do a warrior two if you don't have open hips. It's intense to do back bends if your hamstrings are tight. You know, it's a lot of vulnerable stuff. You know, you're pulling on nerves, you're pulling on different parts of your body. You know, and it's like you just don't need to add to it with, in my opinion, 100-degree fucking room, or you don't need to add to it with this whole idea of just over breathing, just breathing. You're not doing yourself any favors. Like, if the practice is opening the body to come to shavasana, to breathe like we're in shavasana, to just practice letting go of the breath, then why the whole class are we going? Because then you can't. You see these people, their nervous system in shavasana, like they're twitching, they're like rubbing their face, they can't sit still. It's the job of a yoga teacher to help people relax, in my opinion, to help people relax their nerves. And I think some people can be better at their jobs.
Yeah, let's yogically judge all the yoga teachers. I totally do that with like exercise
100% will
yoga.
generalize all of them.
Yeah. Well, and also being like, okay, well, what if that is exercise yoga or this kind of thing, or what if they're different, and also still being like, okay, well, what yoga do you want to practice, Annie? What do you feel good? What do you feel good doing? That was with this topic of talking about change. One of the first things I thought of with your style of teaching is pace and changing your pace, and that because part of that like forced breathing is like, okay, well, we're here for 60 minutes. It for me feels more workout class mentality of like, you got to make the most of these 60 minutes. This 60 minutes is about burning calories, is about getting swole, getting like, here's it shifts what the intention is to me, rather than to me the my intention is to be here right now, to be in my body, to connect my mind and body, to notice that connection that's there, is a totally different experience. I always think about this
Yeah,
too with like hot yoga and all the things of like, what would like the first people that practiced yoga, that did yin yoga, that were like, here's our three poses, we're just gonna sit here in each of them for a while. Like, can you imagine those people like going to like power, like hardcore? It's they'd be like, what is
I
this?
mean, there's a definite Western uh, aspect of yoga, which is fitness and popular and group exercise and stuff like that, and that's great. You know, I'm sure one day again I'll take a hot yoga class when there's a vaccine and I can be around. You know, I can be in the corner in my own space and I don't have to worry about the grossness. Like, but the the thing you said, and I'm not going to say it right, but like, what do you need right now in your practice? What are you coming today to do? Like, so much of what we think our needs are just repeated patterns. If you do something the same way all the time, you're going to think you need that, right? If you there are healthy things and unhealthy things. Like, if you eat a fucking cheeseburger 5 times a week, you're probably going to think that you need to eat a cheeseburger 5 times a week. You know, it's just going to be what you do. If you um, even like that's like subconscious pattern, but if you always practice yoga the same way, you're like, oh god, this is what I need today, this is how I need to unwind. But maybe what that's doing is the same effect as the cheeseburger, of just making you feel the same way all the time. It's like, oh, here it is. Like, a lot of stuff starts to change when you intentionally switch your pace, because shit starts to come up, like, and none like a lot of our first reactions is not to deal with that shit. So can you like slow the fuck down in your yoga class and just be okay with what comes up? It's like to to understand what's going on around you and to understand like the full depth of what is reality means that we need to let go of patterns, means we need to like settle down and not just be in these things of in these mindsets of like, I got to run to yoga, I got to get a cheeseburger, I got to go on a hike today, I got to do all these things. There's stuff we need to do, of course, and there's certain, there's certain times we need to indulge ourselves in things, but it's coming back to the phrase, how how you do anything is how you do everything. If you do your yoga one way, you're going to eat that cheeseburger one way, you're going to drive one way, and intentionally slowing yourself down and just being okay with what comes up. You don't have to like it. You don't have to be cool with it. You just have to be more okay with it, because like shit's gonna come up. And if you're used to going fast, when you slow down, it's gonna be kind of freaky. Especially like when people start to meditate, that's what really fucks with them. They think there's the body stills itself and all this shit starts to come up. And it's like, what? I can't do a fucking chaturanga jump back and flow this out and manipulate the chemicals in my body. It's like, no, you just have to sit there. So to me, that, they used to say the asana is the physical practice, and meditation is the psychological practice. But I think it's like it kind of goes both ways, because in the psychological practice, you can feel a bad emotion come up, and you could do a fucking kick-ass Ardha Chandrasana. You can come up to a half moon and just stretch it out, and you can lean away from, like, you in a yoga pose, something pulls on a nerve which brings up something in your mind. So there's ways to avoid that. There's ways to avoid that. You can kind of avoid the psychological nature of vinyasa yoga, but the physical practice of sitting there, not twitching, not checking your phone, not checking your watch, and just feeling what comes up and not indulging it, because fucking content, the thoughts that come up are so fucking seductive, right? Because it's always about you. It's always like you're always the main character in your fucking thoughts. You're never like going through someone else's shit. And it's always how these things are affecting you. So you start to play out these conversations and you start to play out these ideas. And then you're all the way over here, either 5 years in the past or 10 years in the future, and you're just mind's fucking going crazy. But it's not the content, it's the attitude towards the content that comes up. It's the attitude towards your thoughts. That's what I think would be a good shift or a good change in the perspective of meditation and yoga. It's not just some person who wronged me 2 years ago, or what my brother did to me 15 years ago, or how I was treated by a family member, 30 years ago. It's how am I still holding on to that now? So for me, a lot of anger comes up. So much anger comes up. I wasn't allowed to express it as a child, and it caused like just a big block in me. So a lot of shit that comes up for me is in this state of anger. It's not about that. It's not about like what happened to me as a child. It's about the attitude towards that, which is helplessness, or a feeling of being helpless, So when you sit there and just start to let these things pass, and really, like, it's so fucking hard. It's so fucking hard to get into your own psychology and just allow yourself that mental space of just to like come back to the breath. And it's just hard for a lot of people, because we think we start yoga, we think we start vinyasa, and or meditating, and you'll probably initially feel better, because it feels good. You're getting more oxygen to places that weren't there before. Your muscles feel a little bit more open. Yeah, you start to feel more zen, more zen, more centered. That's a new word, centered. But that also leaves room for a lot deeper shit to come up, a lot more difficulty, a lot more discomfort. And that's when people start to back away from it. That's where we start to think like, oh, I really liked how I felt when I was doing this other yoga or doing this other thing. But
the pacing, I'm hearing a lot of, I'm going to jump in, the pacing of like how to slow down enough to let all of that come up, and then also slow down enough to notice whatever reaction comes up to everything coming up. Because one of the things that's coming up in my head when you're saying this is about the difference of pace in terms of, I know in my experience, I've gone very fast in yoga and in life as a way to avoid, as a way to, or like even like the extreme of like maybe there's some part of me that's feeling very it's like, oh no, this is really hyper focused and attentive. Really, it's some avoidance or some like, let me just put energy towards the pace. Maybe I actually haven't, like, it's like, let me control the pace and make it faster because of these other things I can't control, or these other things that if I slow down enough, I know will ask for more space, and there'll be more space there for them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're not going to notice like the ground in front of you if you're sprinting, slowing down, you start to see like the cracks and shit like that, and the cracks in your psyche. You start to notice the patterns more of like where your head goes. It's like, why do I keep going there? Why do I keep thinking about that person? But it's fucking hard.
I thought that was, I don't know how to mute that on here.
That's okay. Just tell them we're busy.
We're talking. They were giving you an accent to what you were saying about then being able to flag and notice like a dun 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 dun
Yeah.
of like, well, why is my mind going here? Why is this thing happening? So okay, this feels connected to some of the stuff you were sharing before recording about form and formlessness.
Yeah.
Of them being like, okay, well, I'm here in a physical formlessness. Like, what form is my mind jumping onto or going to connect to, or where is my breath going within that too?
Yeah. Your thoughts and emotions definitely have form to them. There's a structure to them. It might be energetic, but that form can cause behavior change. It can cause like a repetitive pattern of behavior, and thoughts on the flip side of them is like thoughts are also like aren't real. They're just thoughts. They just come in and out. It happens. We don't really know why. Like we've all had some like weird thoughts of like where'd that come from? But there's also this sort of abstract formlessness to them of like it's just something that like shoots in and out. It's almost like I like to think of it as a comet that shoots in, passes Earth. Like where the fuck did this come from? Since we can't see into the depths of space, we can only see like a little bit. We can only see, that's a nice metaphor. We can only see a little bit back in time. We can't see back to the beginning. So these fucking comets are there. These comets of thought like come in and they, pull around the sun or pull around Earth or whatever it is. And it's like, what the fuck was that? And then it shoots back out again. Unless it's really big and comes and collides with Earth. And that way we're all fucked. But like knowing that, can we let the forms just take, or can we let the thoughts and the emotions just take a bigger orbit? Like a wider periphery, like the this sort of gravity of thoughts that has this weight to it, has this form to it. Like if we just like have a little more space with it, we just know that like, all right, there's something coming towards me, just let it spin out and go back into the ether. It might come back again, but yeah, I just didn't react to it. I let it have its space. I let it do its thing, and I think Byron Katie says that. It's like you can't let go of your thoughts. The thought has to let go of you. But once you like understand it enough, once you do like the work on it, it's like, oh, you get to know it. Like, oh, it's just this again. It's like Haley's Comet. It's like, oh, this is going to come around, every once in a while. And, it's we'll be fine. It's just going to come in, come out. It's like, I don't know. That's how I think about things. It's like you give yourself more space to have that relationship to everything that's coming at you. So it's like your boundaries change. Like that energetic protective layer around Annie or around me. It's just like it starts to build. You start to have more space for yourself. Being able to show up more in your life.
Space and bounds and intention and letting go and all these things. I'm curious how this connects. It feels very connected to breath to me, of breath and thought being these two things that we have conscious control over and also we don't have conscious control over. So if we're going to let go of the parts we do have, it's like, how do we consciously let go of what we are controlling with them anyways? I love that quote about thoughts. And immediately my head went to like, does this apply to breath too? Does
Yeah.
is this rather than my like forcing knocking my water bottle of like gotta let go of my breath, gotta let go of controlling, like wanting to give form to formlessness almost of like, well, here's how I'm gonna do it, and I'm just like
Well,
noticing
I
that
mean,
thing that comes around that's like, oh, I'm seeing that I'm wanting to do this. Like, what if I let it happen on its own?
yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. I think you just nailed it there. It's like we, the breath is this natural thing that can happen without messing with it, without fucking with it. But if you don't have that awareness, our breath can get really shallow. It can get really constricted. It cannot, we can take much bigger exhales, not take deep enough exhales or long enough exhales. But that's a good training in just letting it happen. That's kind of what I was saying about like in a yoga class. Try to not breathe. It'll happen. Your body will do itself, especially in like meditating or yin poses or even in flow. Like your body knows how much oxygen you need. Your emotions don't. So there's the whole idea of sure, so let this formlessness of breath happen. But sometimes you need to tell yourself, take a deep breath. So there needs to be some sort of, or there can be some sort of uh, conscious direction of your breath at times. And there's like breath work and pranayama and stuff like that, and that's all great. Um, a lot of that stuff can just get you high, like a lot of Kundalini yoga, like doing these things. It's just fucking get you high. It's nice. You can like get some DMT going in your fucking head, and like you can have some like psychedelic experiences from breath work. I've worked with breath work people that I've worked with this one guy, and fuck, that's a whole nother podcast. But um, it's I guess it's just that little space between. It's like how much attention are you giving to your breath, or should you give it a little bit less? It's like that little like don't let that pendulum swing too far from like you're paying attention to your breathing. Just find more of that middle path of just relaxing it, letting the breath drop a little bit deeper.
Do you feel like that also applies to ego? How much attention are you giving your ego? And that same thing of like totally ignoring it. Oh, I
Are you
timed
talking
that
about are you
wonderfully.
talking about me specifically?
No, I'm not. That was your
No, I'm
ego
kidding.
there
I'm kidding.
responding, and my ego is
No,
talking back.
I was
You
making
were
it.
saying about when something comes up, we're always the center of it because we're the only perspective we see the whole world from. And there's the yoga lessons and lots of philosophy lessons of we're all the characters in all of these stories. And it's that
Yeah.
same thing of, in my experience, what I'm noticing is my extremist tendency that's like, oh, I need to give all of the attention to this and eradicate it, or I need to give no attention to this and ignore it, or that same, how do I notice this and give it attention and also say, hey, you're not running the show here. You're not the one driving the car.
Well, I mean, that's kind of it. There's, you're in the car. You might be
You're a
driving it, but
passenger.
no, I think you're driving it, but
The
you're,
ego,
you're,
you think your ego self is driving the car through
there
like this
needs,
material, like this form of the world, because that's what's navigating us.
well, your ego isn't like necessarily bad. The ego is like, it's made out to be a terrible thing. You got to like get rid of your ego and stuff like that. But your ego is going to separate you from the city bus that's coming at you. Your ego is going to say, step out of the fucking way. You know, your ego is going to say, that person is not healthy for me to be around. But yeah, there are like, it totally helps with your ego because again, there needs to be that balance of it. If it's me all the time, that's pulling you out of balance. If you're a people pleaser, I know something about that. It's the opposite way. It's like you. It's not a healthy ego. So the reaction to both of those things is for me was that what I was saying about that anger, that helplessness feeling. It's like my ego is not like it's not there. There's not a healthy enough relationship with it. It doesn't show up enough. It was like underdeveloped. But on the other side of it, it can just your ego can just be out of control as we see sometimes in American politics. But the attachment, I I think they describe this as the Great Fall in Hinduism, where there's this a consciousness that wakes up. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I'm alive. And the consciousness immediately thinks, shit, if I can be alive, what would happen if I wasn't? So the consciousness, I think it is the Great Fall. The consciousness immediately attaches to the closest thing that it can grab onto, and that's the physical form, which is where the ego starts to form. Like, well, I want to live, I don't want to die, so what am I going to do? These things to keep me alive. What do I like? What do I dislike? But yeah, having a healthy ego, I think really helps in all this. Or admitting that maybe my ego isn't healthy enough, or maybe it's a little too much. Maybe I need to pull it back. And that's, you know, that's going back to pacing. You know, some people need to pull back their egos. Mine needed to be sped up a little bit. I needed to show up a little bit more in my life and create more of that space for me. And it's hard. It takes practice.
It's interesting to see then how it's like teaching yourself, and you say this about when you guide a class and it's guiding yourself too of, okay, well, I'm going to show myself how to make more form and space for me by showing other people. It's like
Well, that's
using that same people pleaser thing in a different, you're like, okay, well, how can I change how I'm using this?
yeah. I think it moves from people pleasing to people helping. You know, in a way. The only thing I can do to make the world a better place is to work on me. You know, I think that's a Ram Dass quote or something like that. The only thing I can do is work on myself.
I can do
And
nothing for you but work on myself. You can do nothing for me
yeah,
but work on yourself.
yeah, and
That one helps. That one brings me back.
yeah, and but the way I work through that, and the way I really started to understand that, understanding ways to work about myself or work on myself was through the the language of yoga and the energy and the thoughts and stuff like that. That was like my introduction to it, and then I'm gonna close this window because here comes the
They're giving an accent to you too. It's another
yeah I know, but
outside
oh,
foreign accent to your point here.
the form of a leaf blower is something that I still need some work on.
Um.
But yeah, yoga really started to make sense for me. Yoga was the path that I started on, where I started to understand things more. I started to understand like parts of my mind that were just in denial about the world around me. You know, relationships and everything. And yoga started to really thaw that freeze that I was in of just being blocked mentally. That has really helped, and then getting into the Buddhism meditation stuff has developed that language more. But also being a part of this men's group program has helped me because I can talk all day about Buddhism and meditation, yoga and esoteric stuff, but this program helped me like apply it to me and my life, which is like a much more personal practice of yoga these days. So I'm seeing much more, a lot more change in just my energy and my thoughts and how I do things. Like not getting stressed when I'm driving around the city, not letting road rage take over and stuff like that because I feel so fucking helpless in my car. You know, it allows for that space to. It's like you only have to trick yourself into something once, I think. Like road rage is a really bad thing for me. And then one day I just decided, it's like, I'm not going to do this. Like I spent all weekend, last weekend in Ventura. This is a recent thing too. I was on this beach house and it was the most beautiful thing. And it's like my periphery was 90% ocean, 95% ocean. And just like telling myself, as I was telling you earlier, like sitting there telling myself, I can relax, I can relax, I can relax in this like mantra. I did. You know, I told myself I can relax. I get back to LA and I like the day after, I think it was the same day, and I have to drive across town and teach a class, and I started getting like that rage in the car, and I was like, you don't have to do, you can relax, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do this, and I like tricked myself into not doing it.
Why did it feel like
I mean, we'll
tricking
see what happens.
yourself? rather than like rather than some sort of internal part discussion, some sort of self and ego, and hey, it's this makes sense that you're feeling this, and also you have the option to not.
That,
Here's another thing you could
100,
change of
yeah,
what's
I don't
going
mean
on.
trick myself in a bad way. It
Like you
was
mean like
just
a
like,
very loving trick of like, oh, like also
yeah,
like a trick, like
like,
a tool.
yeah, like a trick, like a trick, like a tool, or just, you know, it's just a little nudge on a record that keeps skipping. You know, it's not malicious. It's not anything. It's just allowing yourself that moment to think like, oh, I don't have to think that way. I One thing that helped me with that was it's a trick in where it's like you just realize you're like, oh, like this is the thought I'm stuck in, and you just kind of laugh it off.
Like a
I
magic
was
trick also. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, like how did this happen? But a couple of months ago, I was on my roof with some of my neighbors, and we were hanging out. And what I noticed, what I noticed throughout the quarantine is when I was just on myself, I was, through the first couple of months, I was okay. I was doing a lot of yoga, a lot of meditating, a lot of journaling, therapy, the men's groups, and coming back to the discomfort thing, like a lot of discomfort would start to come up when I was around other people, even if it was just one or two guys on the roof. A lot of insecurity, thinking to myself, like I heard like the programming a little bit louder because the conscious mind was more quiet. It's like I like to think of the these underlying thoughts that we don't really hear that much. We just react to. There's like the Chiron on the bottom of like ESPN, or the little thing, the little tracker ticker at the bottom. I think it's called the Chiron. But it's like it's just that's what's really going on in the world. There's a talking heads up there, but that's like what's really going on. And I felt that with my thoughts, and I felt myself like this insecure thought, thinking, like, do these guys even like me? I don't really know them that well. Like, and it just felt really like, do they like me? Do they like me? Like, and it was so loud. And a couple days later, I was talking to my therapist about this, and I laugh about it now. And I was telling him the story, and I was like, yeah, it was crazy. I was just thinking, like, do these guys like me? Do these guys like me? And then my therapist asked me, he goes, huh, do you ever ask yourself if you like them? And I just started dying laughing. Like, so much so that, like, my throat hurt, my belly hurt. And it was just like, that's what I mean when I say this little trick of, like, no. I never ask myself if I really like the people I'm around. I just felt like I had to do everything. It's like I had to be nice. I had to be everything. I had to please the entire fucking world, all of my friends, without asking myself, do I even like these people I'm around? And the answer is, there's a lot of people I was around that I didn't really like. Not that I dislike. I just noticed my patterning, and I was thought to myself, well, I just don't have to do that anymore. And when you notice, and for the most part, I don't think I have been. I want people to like me in some sense of the word. It's like if they don't like me, they're not going to come to my class, and I'm not going to make money. But the more I work on myself, and the more I come to that place of I like myself, I like the yoga I'm practicing, I like what it is. That's the only thing I can do. That's the only way I can be the best teacher I can be, is to just be more me.
All change has to start with you, and the only ego you have any egoic control over changing is yours. I'm reminding myself.
Oh
I
God,
can't
I
go
know.
on that, like, I need to hang out with this person or do this thing, or, oh my gosh, what if they don't like me? What if whatever? Instead of being like, well, what do you like? What do you want to do? Your opinion, your perspective, this to me is that in my personal journey of how to also give attention to my ego of saying, hey, you are here to protect me. And it, like you're saying, of with people, for an example of, it's different from being like, oh, that person's bad and I'm going to label them as bad and wrong and meh, 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 as much as saying, oh, I notice I feel more drained after this interaction, or I feel like I go down more this pattern that doesn't feel so good to me. Wait, I don't have to, I can choose not to do that. I can choose to go another route.
Yeah, to say that, I'm 41 years old, and to actually feel that for the first time in my life over the past couple months is just such a fucking relief. And it's a big relief as a teacher too, even though, I That doesn't mean I'm an expert on this. I fuck up all the time, and that's just part of it. But it's just like that's the reminder. It's like, do I like what I'm doing? Do I like what I'm practicing? Do I like what I'm cooking for dinner? Like, fuck. Like, the amount of stupid fucking diets and meal restrictions and like, I can't eat gluten. I got to go, like, all this stuff that I would do to myself for years just because I thought I had to. Just because I was stuck in some thought loop of like, oh, well, that girl is vegan and I want to date her, so I'm going to stop eating meat. Just like fucking crazy shit like that. It's like, come on.
Instead of
Fuck.
being like, what do you want to eat? What do you feel good with?
Yeah, or like going to take a teacher's class. Like there's two teachers and I used to take their classes all the time. I work with them. And they were a huge part of a huge influence on me in my early days of teaching. But it got to a point where I was like, I don't think I like their classes. Doesn't mean I dislike them. Maybe I just need to take a break from them. And I did, and it felt so nice to like say to myself, I don't have to do these things. I don't have to run around all the time and just drain my fucking energy because I have limited amounts, and I gotta keep a majority of that energy for myself.
It's true. Fill up your own, as you take a sip of water, fill up your own cup.
I know, this is great. During this podcast, I will have drank 48 ounces of water, and that makes me feel very good and hydrated.
You are filling up your cup, literally and figuratively.
Well, I have to refill it because I'm drinking it.
And you can fill it for yourself there.
Yeah.
Also, my ego's going to like, oh, the podcast is filling up your cup and my cup too, and it just keeps coming around.
It is. I love talking to you. I love podcasting with you. So my cup is filling. It would put me in a good space to go teach a class at 6 o'clock.
Cool.
So thank you. This is benefiting me too.
You're welcome, and thank you. It is nice for me to get to learn about reciprocity and that letting go of the people pleasing and even the people helping that I feel like I'll take to that same extreme too of like, look at me, I'm the helper. I'm so good. Oh yeah, like look at you're doing all the instead of being like, okay, well, it feels good to help people, and that's why you're doing it because you like it, and coming back to that same same thing with pace too, that you don't notice if you don't. I don't notice if I don't slow down.
Yeah,
or like slow down to be like, oh, is this podcast filling up your cup too? This is filling up my cup. Like, it's also that stuff is like can be like it can seem unexciting in some ways to do, or like, oh, is this going to disrupt the flow, or in some ways it seems, for me at least, learning that it's safe and that it's okay and that it's acceptable to slow down the pace.
It's 100% acceptable to slow down, and if that means that relationships around you change, then that's what needs to happen. You know, there's a pain in strength of telling yourself like, I need to change, I need to slow down, I need to have space from relationships that weren't filling me or weren't fulfilling me. Like asking yourself like, what really moves and nourishes you, you know? Like at the end of the day, I've been journaling 3 to 5 things that brought me pleasure that day. Sometimes it's a cheeseburger. More often than not, it's a cheeseburger and fries, let's be honest. But it's just like little things. Like maybe I taught a good class. Maybe I gave someone a good cue. And I was like, oh yeah, I really saw that. Like what brought me pleasure that day? Was it a bike ride? Was it a hike? Was it saying no to someone that I needed to say no to, you know? And then after that, so I do like 3 to 5 things there. And then I do 3 to 5 things that I did well. And sometimes they're the same things. Sometimes I make a really good cup of coffee. But it like, things like that start putting you on the perspective change to just noticing stuff. Like, oh, that cup of coffee is really good. You know? It's like, and then I wake up the next morning and I read everything from the next day, do a gratitude list, and go on.
Wow, that's so structured. And
I thank the men's group for that because I needed that
form.
sort of structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I needed a little more form of some thoughts because I was stuck in this abstractness of like there needed to be more Deacon in my relationships because there wasn't a lot. It was out of balance.
Is that like with the formlessness then? Of like, oh, let me shape shift my form. I'm totally also, that's been my experience of it.
Yeah. It's it's like, where are you in relationship to everything else? And there needs to be balance, but there just needs to be more you know, in like what, or I'm saying for myself, there needed to be more me in general. Just like, where am I in the balance of the form of another person and this formlessness of like, where do I stand? Like, do I even like what is happening here? And it's tough. It's painful to like be honest with yourself and say, no, I don't like this. It's tough to take a stand for yourself. Like a couple of years ago, I stepped away from relationships, like friendships with dudes that I've known since college, because I was just like, this doesn't suit me anymore. It was fucking hard. It was hard to walk away from like 6 friends that I would talk to every day, but it was just, over a group text. But you got like, just me, I just couldn't. You just get to a point where you're like, you got to be honest with yourself. Be like, does this work for me or it doesn't? And if it doesn't, like, once you realize that, once you realize you're on a path, you instantly become the master of that path, no matter what it is. And
Say more about that. What do you mean by master of it? Like, once you realize that you're the one walking and or being guided?
Yeah. Once you realize once you realize that there's change. I was a different person before I went to Bali and did my teacher training years ago. And when I came back, I instantly noticed how loud everything was around me, how loud the people were, how loud the relationships were, and how suffocating they were. And I knew I couldn't go on with that. So I started to realize that, like, all right, if I'm on this path of self-improvement and working on myself and being a yoga teacher, then I have to show up on that path. I can't keep being pulled from left to right because I have no balance and I'm like energetically being pulled by this boundarylessness that was my psyche. It wasn't my reality.
And it wasn't honoring your form and your reality, and you
Yeah,
also being a human in a body with an ego and with needs and with all of the things.
yeah, and being the master of the path doesn't mean that like every step that's coming. You just need to know that there's one step ahead of you, and maybe you see a little bit of the second stone. That's all you need. Like mastering the path is just saying this faith of coming back to it. Like this is happening for a reason. If I have to let go of a best friend for 17 years, then I have to do that.
The pace again of like letting it, like I've said like a lot, of allowing things to unfold how they
Yeah.
will and at their own pace and in their own.
Well, yeah. I mean, that comes back to the whole idea of like a higher power or whatever that is for you. It's like the universe, God, whatever it is. Like your higher power can be anything, as long as it's not you. You
Because then
know.
it's not higher power.
Yeah. Because yeah, exactly. But it's just this. There's got to be a reason for stuff, and I think the reason is a lesson in just learning to relax more and just relax into yourself, like like an easy chair. It's like a new Barker lounger. When you get it, you got to break that shit in. You got to like keep getting back in it. You got to keep releasing into it, or I should say like a new like a new yoga bolster. You got to keep releasing into that thing over and over again to get it like the place where you want it to be, where it feels really good for your back. And life and relationships are no different. It's just how you do anything is how you do everything.
So with that you, then there's a constant you is in that. If it's you always doing the thing, then
Yeah,
how much is constant and then how much are we learning? How much is all this contrast and change and everything around us showing us more what that constant is? The contrast of, okay, well, all this around me is changing, and here it's still me. It's still Deacon. I'm still Deacon with this situation. Now I'm Deacon in this situation. Oh, now I'm
yeah,
Deacon in this situation.
but with enough attention to your patterns, things change. Like there's going to be a you until the day that there's not anymore. Until there's like this, until you leave this physical form, whatever the fuck happens. But in that time, between now and whenever that is, I just think your life's going to be a lot better and have a lot more ease if you know that there's a you, but know that like there's that there's an Annie, there's a personality, there's likes and dislikes, there's a physical form, but there's also that formlessness of like everything's changing. The cells in your body, even your thoughts are changing. Like how often, or like a thought comes in and you're like, fuck, and you get really nervous about something. And then 10 minutes later, you're like laughing and like giggling, playing video games or whatever it is. Or like on the phone with someone. It's like everything is moving, everything is changing. It's constant. Just let it happen. Just like go with it. It's the whole idea of like life is the water and you are the wave. You're one of the same thing. You're just an expression of this movement. You're the Alan Watts quote. You're not the end result of it. You're a continuation of the process. So just like let things flow through you, the good and the bad.
At whatever pace they're gonna be there, because there is no good or bad pace apparently.
It's just whatever the pace is,
Just whatever it is, man.
Whatever. I mean, yeah, in a way, like whatever it is, doesn't mean like nothing matters. It means whatever it is to help you feel calmness, to help you feel ease.
I appreciate you bringing that part up a bit of the other pendulum of no, it's not. Okay, well then nothing has any meaning and we're into nihilism. It's, okay,
there's endless meaning, and like it's up to us to find meaning in everything you do. Maybe it's just in a cup of coffee. Maybe it's in a podcast. Maybe it's the fact that you did 4 loads of laundry that day. Wow, fuck, I did that for me. But it's about moving in the direction where you feel the best.
And you're only going to be able to notice that if you slow down enough to even realize what direction you're moving in.
Yeah, if got to slow down, pull our heads out of our asses, and then re-find our center and be like, all right, this is the way I want to move. And it can be a 180. Being a yoga teacher is a complete 180 from the days of being an actor.
Ooh, a lot of formlessness difference there too, and ego difference. And
that's another podcast.
It is. And I definitely hear some overlap of, and I feel like I've heard this from actors before, of part of trying on and putting on all of these different egos and different characters. It can both help people really strengthen their sense of who am I separate from this, and also it can seem to then be really tiring to be like, well, who am I if I'm always putting on these different roles and I'm stepping into this? Whereas for me, the yoga practice, any sort of asana or otherwise is okay, none of this matters, and also it has all the meaning I want to give it, and okay, so now what? Yeah. Whereas like acting or like creative things, even with the podcast, I'm like, cool, well, like I have a job, I have a set intention here, like there's this form bound of it.
Yeah. Acting was fine for me, but I see how in a lot of ways it was really unhealthy for me. And I'm very happy to have some space from that old life. But in a way, it gave me a lot of great skills for being in front of people, being okay with it, improvising, being able to crack a joke to release the tension in the room because everyone gets so fucking serious, There's things I definitely benefited from it, but I think it's a really easy way to get lost. But that's another podcast. We can talk about that next time, yeah.
The next one. Yeah, we changing our pace here and not needing to get through figuring out exactly what all the things mean in one podcast because they're going to keep changing. Yeah. So apparently that point doesn't exist. I'm very much again needing to remind myself of this one.
Yeah, I wish people would stop talking about the present moment because there isn't anything. The present moment is just that bird out there doing its thing. The present moment is the light through the window. The present moment is just podcasting with you. We don't have to get anywhere. It's just because like the moment you like think you're like, oh, I got it, I'm present. It's fucking gone, and you're living in the past.
Do you ever play that game where you lose the game when you remember you're playing the game? Have you heard of that one ever?
No.
It's a like I remember I feel like in like elementary school of like, oh, I made you lose the game. Haha, you just remembered you're playing the game and now you lose and that's how you win or lose the game. Like you win the game by forgetting you're playing it. And I feel like that
It's
sometimes breath and thought of like when you let go, when you forget, when you ease up on the I need to control the pace of this and what's happening and whatever.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's just meditating. Like you can get there when you're playing tennis. You can get there when you're knitting. It's just that allowing yourself to just that space to just to forget that this is all this is just a game. The game of life.
Play ball. The adventure and the journey.
Yeah.
And the having the humor of it of like noticing, oh wow, I just started going down this path, or I just started doing this thing.
Yeah. And it's hard, It takes practice. So does yoga. So does anything you do. It just takes fucking practice, and it need to give like it took. How long does it take you to form these patterns of shoving our heads up our asses? Sometimes it's going to take a little while to get your head out. It's that's why it's. I think yoga has to be in everything you do. It has to be in just let it permeate everything.
It's very cool to get to see how you navigate that from this outside ego perspective of your yoga ego and your thing of yogaing all of the things.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a changing practice.
The main constant here in this life game.
Hell yeah.
Change keeps on changing. Okay, I know you got to go. So speaking of pace and time and all of these things, we will
Appreciate
podcast.
That.
We will podcast again. We will talk more about change and see what pace changes happen there.
Yeah, this was fun. I'm glad we got to do this again. I'm glad you're relaxing in Hawaii and being all chill.
I'm learning to slow my speech pace, my thought pace, the need to do things pace, and still be
Island
like,
living,
hey,
baby.
what?
Island living.
Yeah, island time is real. And also so is, hey, I like podcasting. Hey, I like talking to people about these things. So I'm going to
Yeah.
do it. Just like you going to teach because you like it.
I mean, I'm still teaching online, because I like to do it.
So people can find you at Deacon Yoga and
DeaconYoga.com, or there's a website, my website. You can sign up for my mailing list there, which is important. You get all the news about classes and stuff like that. And also on Instagram, Deacon Yoga.
And on YouTube.
And on YouTube, yeah. Instagram and website will have all the links to stuff. So thanks. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for thank you for podcasting. Here I go with pace being like, nah.
That's all right. We're pressed for time. That's why we just get everything in.
Yeah,
but
we're learning.
We're learning.
Thanks so much for podcasting. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Annie. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being you.